So, like I said, feel free to keep yourself unmuted if there's not noise behind you. If you feel like reacting or have a quick question, I don't hesitate to jump in. We'll also be able to take some questions at the end. It shouldn't take the entire time. What I'm going to be talking about today is basically a primer, something that's going to help people get started, know what they need to know to understand, and maybe get started creating a smart home using the Apple smart home technology, the Apple home environment. And I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about some of the history behind this. So the foundation for this home is going to be a quick history lesson. Round about the time that the other major players in this space, Amazon and Google, were working on coming to market with smart speakers and smart home control, Apple was doing pretty much the same thing. And they announced something called HomeKit that was going to make it possible for manufacturers and developers to control and integrate a bunch of products in their home. Now, prior to this, there were lots of smart home products out there that worked with your phone, and you could have an app for each product. And it's funny because um, Ken Ray and I have kind of this running joke that he always wondered, why do I need more than just my phone? My phone is the aggregator. It's the thing that has all the apps, and the apps get me to my smart things. So why do I need to have everything even further aggregated into a different app or put all together? But there are benefits to doing that, and we'll talk about what some of those benefits are. So they created this platform that developers could use to create a smart home software and hardware infrastructure. And then they created a certification program that they would use with these manufacturers and developers so that you could have something official. And they called this Works with HomeKit, which is a little weird because HomeKit is a tool that developers use, and Works with HomeKit was a consumer facing thing. So eventually they ended up changing that to Works with Apple Home. And now all the things that used to say Works with HomeKit, and we're so used to saying Works with HomeKit, we still do, but it's really called Works with Apple Home now. If you see this badge on a box, it means that it's designed to work in Apple's smart home ecosystem, either software or hardware, like a smart switch or a smart plug, something like that. So, with all of this put together and some partner organizations in the cuff, Apple launched HomeKit in 2015. And it was, well, kind of a mess. So they had 5 original launch partners. Lutron, a well-known lighting company that already had a smart home product. Insteon, a smart lighting company that had lots of devices. Ecobee, a thermostat company out of Canada. Elgato, now known as now split into 2 organizations. Elgato that makes podcasting stuff and broadcasting stuff, and Eve, their brand of smart home products. And iHome, that was probably best known for clock radios, but also then decided to launch some smart home stuff. And they were all kept in their own little sandboxes and not allowed to talk to each other. But the whole thing with Apple Home was everything was supposed to be able to work together. But none of these vendors really knew how that was going to properly work. So they all ended up doing their own thing and doing it differently. Lutron came out with a mechanism for sharing their stuff in any other Apple HomeKit app or ecosystem, but didn't show anyone else's stuff in their app. And then Insteon showed everybody's devices in the Insteon app that they created for HomeKit, but not all of their devices worked in HomeKit, and that confused a lot of consumers. And Ecobee came out saying, and now you can control your thermostat with your voice, which is probably, I don't know, the least engaging capability that a thermostat may have. So they didn't really understand the benefit that they were offering either. And iHome ultimately had a system that shared all of their devices with other systems and also let you control everybody else's devices from their software. So they probably implemented the cleanest solution here. Elgato did something very similar. Of these, Eve today probably has the best app that a manufacturer makes for any Apple Home ecosystem. It shows everybody's devices, has a lot of customization control that other apps don't have, and gives you a lot of visibility into your homes. Well, because this was such a mess, Apple ultimately decided, all right, we need to create our own app. We're going to come out with our own app and we're going to call it Apple Home, because Apple is great at overloading terms and having the same term mean multiple things. So this time we're talking about Apple Home, the app. And if you're familiar with this at all today, this is the app that runs on all your different Apple devices and allows you to control everything that's connected through Apple Home in one common interface across all those platforms: your computer, your tablet, your phone, your watch. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't still need the app that your device's manufacturer came out with. For example, the app that came with Ecobee shows a whole bunch of energy monitoring information and scheduling information that doesn't necessarily show up in the home dashboard. The dashboard is just designed to be the place where everybody in your home, in your family, can go and see one common, easy to use way to control stuff in the house. But it's not really how you're going to ultimately dive into the deep details of every feature that a product that you have has and set it up and all of that stuff. Now, two more things I want to talk about. There's a lot of talk about the cloud and things running on the cloud. With HomeKit, Apple uses the iCloud keychain as a way to securely store all the information about your home, the devices that you have in it, and their current state. And that's it. It shares that information and makes it available to the Home app and other Apple Home apps through the cloud. That's the only thing they're using the cloud for. So is Apple a cloud-based smart home system? Because that could be considered good or it could be considered bad. And I would argue that it is not, because all of the stuff that's happening in your home, it's happening locally. That means if you lose your internet connection, as many people apparently do, way more than I do, then your smart home stuff is still going to work. It's not dependent on something out in the cloud to make it work. The functionality of your home resides all locally inside your home. And that's generally a good thing. That's what a lot of people who are building smart homes want to get to: less dependency on the cloud. They're just using the cloud to share information across devices. All right. So why would you want a smart home? What's the advantage of having a smart home? Well, there are a couple of reasons, and I'll give some examples. So the first one might be savings. You might want to save money or energy. You might want to turn the lights off after your kids leave a room because they never do. You might want to set back the temperature or participate on demand response programs, those programs that energy providers have where if you allow them to, say, duck your temperature a couple degrees during high energy peak periods, then they'll give you a rebate each year or each quarter, what have you. So there's some benefits to doing that from a savings perspective. You may want to do it for convenience reasons. You might just want lights to come on and off with the sunrise and sunset. You might like the ability to control things with your voice. Or you could create, say, virtual three-way circuits. You have a switch in one place and it really needs to be in the other place because that's where you always want to turn the light on. And you can do that with a smart switch and a remote switch combination. They make these switches that are actually remotes that are really just the toggle parted or the paddle part itself, and they can literally just stick on your wall, look just like a switch, and operate the switch remotely just with some coin cell batteries. Really slick solution to solving a tricky problem. You may do it for safety reasons. You may want to light a path at night so you don't trip or fall up or down the stairs. You might want to warn the family of emergencies. If an alarm goes off, have the lights come on or open some shades or something. You might do it for security reasons. You might want to see who's at the door before you answer the door, or you might want to capture trespassers that are on your property with a camera, or get notified if there's motion in your home and you're not expecting it. There's someone's entering your home or there's motion in your home. You're not expecting that. You might want to get a notification. Good security features there. I'll call this away control or remote control. Calling it remote control sounds kind of weird, so I'll call it away control. But the ability to, say, remotely lock or unlock your door. Let's say your dog walker has arrived and they don't have a key, and you didn't want to give them a code, but the protocol that you've set up with them is just call me and I'll unlock the door for you. No problem. So you could do that. Uh, or if you think you forgot to lock the door, you can check, are your doors locked, and lock them. I have on multiple occasions forgotten to put the garage door down, and am happy that I have the ability to do that remotely. And then maybe turning on the front light if you're away and you want to make sure that there's some light on the house because you're going to be coming home late or something. And then there's kind of the gratuitous answer that it's kind of cool. Like sometimes you may want to do it just because it's fun, and you're a geek, I'm a geek, and you just want to do stuff like this. So that's fair. You're a tinkerer maybe, or you like fun color lighting, or your kids like fun color lighting and you want to play with that. Uh, Smart home and using Apple Home for that is a good way to accomplish that. All right. So if you want to get some smart home products, then how do you know what's going to work? Just like USB, USB is not USB is not USB. There's like all of these different standards that exist and different plugs and such. The same is true with the wireless technology that runs smart home. Now, we already talked about how if you look for a box for a product that works with HomeKit or works with Apple Home badge on it, you know it's going to work in the Apple Home ecosystem. But there's another standard that has launched fairly recently in the last couple of years. And it too, when it launched, was messy, but it's getting better and more reliable. And that is a standard called Matter. And Matter is, for the first time, all the big players. I mean, all the big players. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Samsung, LG. I think I mentioned Apple, Amazon, all the big players and a lot of the small players have gotten together and said, this is ridiculous. We can't all keep doing things our own way. We have to figure out how to make this stuff work together better. So they worked for years to put together a standard, and it has evolved over the last 2 or 3 years as it's been out. And this standard runs over IP, which means that it runs on Wi-Fi, or it can also run on a fairly new wireless protocol called Thread. And Thread is something that ultimately came out of the labs of Google and really from Nest back in the day. And it's been adapted to run a bunch of smart home devices so that they can talk to each other without clogging up your Wi-Fi. So this seems like a good time to probably talk about some definitions, unless anybody has any questions right now. All right, let's dive into some definitions. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading here, but not too much. All right, I mentioned the word protocol. What the heck is a protocol? It's nothing more than it's how devices talk to each other. So Wi-Fi is a protocol. Computers talk to each other on Wi-Fi. Lots of stuff works on Wi-Fi. Video over Wi-Fi, and now smart home. The challenge with that is that every single Wi-Fi device you have on your smart home shows up in your router, and that's one more thing for your router to deal with. And that can get really noisy and messy. And frankly, Wi-Fi was not designed for smart home products. Newer versions are getting better at managing the small packets of information that smart home products send back and forth, but it's still kind of inefficient for your network router to be managing this stuff. So there are other communication mechanisms that allow devices to talk to each other. I just mentioned Thread. That's one of them. Clear Connect is a proprietary protocol that Lutron created for its devices, and it is really, really good. It's existed for years. It's rock solid. Zigbee is another standard that you might hear. Hue bulbs, for example, have a nice Zigbee logo on their boxes. They all communicate to each other using Zigbee. And like newer Wi-Fi devices, Zigbee is a mesh protocol, meaning that the more devices you add, the stronger it gets, the better it gets, because they kind of communicate through each other. Z-Wave is an older protocol that's less popular now, but still around and used a lot in the security space. And Bluetooth was used a lot for smart home. Nowadays, it's really only used to negotiate the initial connection of a device into your smart home. And then after that, most things aren't talking Bluetooth anymore. But all of this stuff can be used as a way of communicating with Bluetooth. And so all of these standards were getting kind of confusing. People didn't know what to get. And so we ended up with Matter trying to kind of consolidate all that and say, all right, Wi-Fi and Thread is how we're going to do this. And most of the big manufacturers are getting on board with this, which will ultimately make things easier for all of us. The challenge with these other protocols, things that don't talk Wi-Fi, is, well, how do they get on the network? How does my network, my home network, know about these devices? Well, they typically work through a hub or a bridge of their own. So you may know, if you have Hue bulbs, that when you buy Hue bulbs, typically you also need to buy a Philips Hue bridge. And so the bulbs connect to the bridge, and then you add your bridge to Apple Home, and Apple Home just sees everything already connected to the bridge. And you keep adding stuff to your Hue bridge, and all your Philips Hue bulbs will show up automatically in Apple Home, which is pretty slick. Then you have other manufacturers like IKEA, Lutron, that also have hubs. IKEA their old one is a Zigbee bridge. I'm going to crucify this name. I think it's Dirija, is a thread-based router. And then Lutron has its own hub for its Clear Connect stuff. Now, you could argue that because all the devices in an Apple smart home communicate to each other through HomePods and Apple TVs, that the Apple TV or HomePods in your home are actually a hub for your Apple Home stuff, for your Thread and Wi-Fi Apple Home stuff. We could probably debate that for hours. Let's do that over a beer sometime. Now's not the time. Now let's talk about some basics for setting up a smart home. You'll hear terms like a scene. Well, all right, what's that? It's basically just I'm doing multiple things at once. Instead of just saying I'm turning a light on, I'm going to say, all right, well, for movie time, I'm going to have something called movie time, and it means I'm going to turn off the lamps here on the end table, and then I'm going to dim the rest of the lights to 20%. Set things up the way I would want for a movie, or maybe a good night scene that turns everything off, but keeps the light on the stairs on dim, so you can still walk upstairs and not trip and fall while you're trying to go to bed. So a scene's just a combination of things that you're doing all at the same time. And then an automation is something that happens automatically. So for example, when I come home, I want the garage door to open. Based on my proximity, it'll know that I'm nearby, and it will open the garage door. How does it know that I'm nearby? It has my phone is on me. That's how. Or at sunset, based on some solar events or on time events, on sunset, I want the front porch light to go on automatically. So these things would occur automatically. That's why they're called automations based on a trigger. And a trigger could be anything. This is your classic Apple slide. There's a million things here. I'm going to read three of them. So you might have something like every weekday at 6:30, my nightstand light goes on and the blinds open. Or you might have something where when someone presses a specific button on a keypad, you're going to do something. Or if it turns out that water's leaking somewhere, you're going to do something. So there's lots of things. I literally went off the page here as I was typing stuff in, and I just let it go on because you could come up with literally hundreds of examples for things that you might use to trigger an automation. And how do you do that? Well, we talked about time and events, and you have your phone on you, so your phone knows where you are and if you're home or if you're not, but also sensors. Sensors are a really good way of helping to know the environmental state of your home. And it could be whether someone's there or moving, or what the temperature, humidity is, whether there's water around, how much light is in the room, whether a door has opened, stuff like that. And these are just examples of some of the newer and more popular sensors that are out there. The Hue in the bottom right is a great sensor. I'll talk about this again later. Aqara just came out with a really interesting presence sensor that doesn't detect motion so much as it knows if someone's there or not. So you could stay perfectly still because you're reading, and the light's still not going to go off because it knows you are there. And that's an important thing that motion sensors cannot do yet. So pretty cool devices that are still coming out. People say there's no new innovation coming out. I disagree. There's cool stuff. All right. So where do you start? If you are interested in starting a smart home or building out your smart home, where would you start? Well, I generally advise people start with smart lighting because it's one of the easiest things and it's one of the most inexpensive ways to get into the smart home world. But the question then is, do you want switches or do you want bulbs? And like most things, the answer is depends. Did someone have a question?
Motor week.
All right, I'll continue on. So I would argue that unless you're looking for either the color changing capability of light bulbs, or maybe you live in an apartment and you can't hardwire something into the place where you live. You want to be able to just install something and then take it away with you when you leave. Then in those cases, in those two cases, smart bulbs are probably the way to go. If you are living in your home and you have lights installed around your home, then I would probably make the case for smart switches. I tend to think that smart switches are a little bit more family friendly because everybody knows how to use a switch and you don't have to have an app or some weird button that doesn't look like a switch and people don't know what it is to be able to control the lights. You could just have something that looks like a switch. People know what to do with a switch. It's a switch. Press it. We'll talk a little bit more about switches and types of switches. Now, there are other areas where there are lots of devices available, and they're pretty good entry points. Smart speakers is one of them. Of course, I would imagine that many of you probably already have either a HomePod or some AirPlay 2 compatible speakers around your home. Some really interesting things that not a lot of people know is that your Sonos system can link with your HomePods because they're AirPlay 2 compatible. And so as a result, you can tell your Siri device, your smart speaker, to play something and have it play not just on it, but also to the nearby Sonos speakers or connected Sonos speakers. And I use that to control stuff around my home all the time. It's really convenient. And then thermostats, of course, are another easy entry point. There are a couple different thermostats. There are two from Nest that work through Matter, so they're compatible with Apple. And then there's the Ecobee, and then a bunch of other brands also have some. I tend to think that Ecobee and Nest are probably the best in the bunch here. And then doorbells. Smart doorbells is another way to get in. For as little as $70, you can buy yourself a smart doorbell and see who's at the door. Not all of them are going to be fully integrated into Apple Home, but many of them actually allow you to answer the door from Apple Home itself. You don't have to go into the app. You can check the state. You can trigger events based on someone ringing the doorbell, turn on a light so that at night, if there's not any light on in the front of the house and you have to walk up front, then you're not walking in the dark, stuff like that. Pretty easy ways to get in without too much expense. Of these, thermostats are probably the most expensive here because you can get speakers for $99. I think even the new ones that are going to be coming out are still expected to be $99. So then you can go even further. Stuff like automated blinds. I have a couple blinds throughout my home that go up automatically at a certain time of day or go down at night. And we also have them go up or down based on what season it is. In the afternoons, in the winter, I want the sun to come in. In the summer, I don't want the sun to come in the afternoon because it gets too hot. So smart blinds can be really good at helping you kind of conserve or gain that additional heat in your home, depending on what season it is. Smart locks exist in so many forms, and I've had a number of these. My advice on smart locks is buy a lock from a lock maker. Don't buy a lock from a startup that is trying to make things smart but doesn't have experience with locks. Locks are an important part of your home. Yes, someone could throw a brick through your window and who cares about the lock, but the reality is the lock is a barrier and you want to feel secure about it. Yale, Schlage, all of these companies that have been doing locks for years and years all have smart locks that work well with Apple Home and are really good options. And we're starting to see some appliances come into play. This is a smart vacuum from Roborock. I just heard today that apparently iRobot, the beloved vacuum robot company, has filed for bankruptcy. So don't buy one of those. But we're starting to see more and more smart appliances also be compatible with Apple Home. So far, it's not a lot. So far, most of the appliance manufacturers, and we were talking earlier before I started about big box appliances, refrigerators and ovens and dishwashers and stuff like that. Those typically will send alerts and stuff like that to the Google and Amazon ecosystems. They don't yet integrate directly with Apple Home, but that is changing as Matter continues to support more smart home stuff. And then don't forget the holidays as a great opportunity to buy some smart plugs. Smart plugs are an easy way to get the lights on your home on a schedule. And since it's getting darker and darker, earlier and earlier every day, you don't have to set it to a particular time. You can actually have it come on a certain period after sunset or at sunset every night, which is kind of nice because it doesn't look like things are on a timer because it changes every day. If you're worried about, oh, well, for security reasons, I don't want the lights coming on every at the same time every day because that's a dead giveaway that nobody's home. But sunset scenes and sunrise scenes kind of help with that, so you don't have that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of using smart plugs for indoor and outdoor holiday lights. I set up a scene called Christmas time, and I have my assistant turn on the Christmas trees just with a voice command. It's really easy. So another great way to get started in it. Now, what if you're a real big geek and you want to go way deeper than the basic stuff? There is stuff out there for you too. So I mentioned that Eve has an app that has all of the different devices in your Apple Home and exposes things that not all of the different apps expose. And so what that does is it gives you the ability to control things or see information about devices that you can't see elsewhere. The best app for doing that, in my opinion, is an app called Controller for HomeKit. I know the developer for this. He's based in Europe, and he has been building this, and this has become his full-time job. And this gives you significant control over everything in HomeKit, including adding conditions to your automations. So instead of just saying, I only want, or I want the light on my nightstand to come on weekdays at 7 a.m., but I only want that to happen if some other light isn't already on. Maybe because you're downstairs and you don't want to then, you're already up and you don't want the lights going on and disturbing someone else. If you're already up, that would be a waste. You can add conditions and have the scenes controlled in specific cases, which is really amazing. It also has this incredible mapping feature. So I am going to try to see how a video does. Tell me if this doesn't work well. But I'm going to invite you into my home for 2 minutes as we use this app to map out what my family room and adjacent rooms look like. I'm literally just holding the app up and pointing it at things in my home. And it's identifying them. It's finding windows. It's finding furniture. And you keep pointing it at stuff and it continues to draw out what it's seeing, all in 3 dimensions, and add stuff as you go over. If you see something that it did wrong, you can go back and point it at it and it'll do it differently. Look also how it noticed that this wall to the left of the fireplace goes back deeper than the fireplace itself. It automatically recognized that. Continue around. It's going to find the rest of the furniture in this room. So then we'll just kind of turn around and point it quickly to the other side. Here's the kitchen. We see the chairs in the way of the kitchen. I'm going to walk into the breakfast room. And it's going to catch, again, the windows, all the spaces in here. It's going to see that there are chairs at a table. It's doing all of this in real time. This just blows my mind how good this is. This is all happening locally on my phone. Now I'm going to walk across the bar and notice there's stuff on the bar. There's stuff in my way. There's lights and it's still finding the cabinets and it's drawing out the cabinets there. So now I have a draft, but fairly accurate map of my space as a floor plan in 3 dimensions. And now in his app, I can use this to place my smart home stuff, tell it where that lamp is and where my Christmas tree is and where the television is, and be able to control things visually through a map in the app. I think this is just brilliant technology. Hopefully that came through fairly well for you. All right. Another way that you can go pretty deep is to bring additional things that don't work with HomeKit natively into your Apple Home. And you can do that using 2 other tools. One of them is Homebridge. And Homebridge is fairly known for being one of the first systems that you can run yourself on your NAS at home, or you can run it on a Raspberry Pi, or you can buy a little box from them. I've anytime someone says Raspberry Pi to me, I ran away. I was like, that's not me. I'm not into that. I don't want to go that deep. And I set one of these up, and it was so easy. And it let me bring Ring products, and it let me bring my WebOS television and other things that otherwise did not natively work in my Apple Home. And it shows them now in Apple Home, which is just brilliant. I love it. So on the bottom here in this poorly masked uh, collection of icons is an example of some of the different products that this can bring in. But you can go deeper than that. You've probably heard people talk about Home Assistant. Home Assistant is the big growing thing right now, and it is an open source mechanism for controlling your home. It will also expose all the things that it knows into your Apple Home if you want to be able to control it all from Apple Home. And generally, that's pretty good as an idea because Home Assistant itself as a front end interface is not that great. It's very customizable, it's very techy, it's very fidgety. But once you get everything that it can connect to, and look at all these brands here, all this stuff that it can connect to that maybe Apple Home can't do on its own, then you can use your Home app in your Apple device to control everything, which is really sweet. This too can run on a box that they sell, or run on a NAS, or run on a Raspberry Pi, however you choose to do it. But this is getting deep, 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 and really, really, really geeky. You need to do it that way. No, sometimes all you need is a motion switch. I'm talking about all this smart stuff. One of the smartest decisions you can make is that if your pantry has a switch on the inside, and that switch faces where you'll be when you're in that pantry, then put a motion sensor switch in there and call it done. Why isn't that's the smartest solution you can do? You don't need to monitor the state of that or do anything fancy there. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just a simple motion switch and maybe a light sensor, and stuff like that can serve your need without having to go and buy all these expensive products. But don't go down the route of buying mechanical timers. They're just bad. They're cheap. And what do we just say? The sun sets at different times every day. So it doesn't really make sense to have a timer for a light in your home, because when you're going to want it to go off and go on, it's going to change constantly. So generally, when it comes to non-smart devices, I love sensor switches. Not a big fan of mechanical timers. All right. We're going to wrap things up with some tips, some unsolicited tips. I'm going to give you some advice here, whether you expected it, wanted it, or not. So listen at your own discretion. The first one is that if you're buying smart home products and you have not purchased smart home products before, don't just buy something that's going to work with Apple Home and only Apple Home, unless it's the only product out there that's going to meet your need. Look for things that might also work with Google and might also work with Amazon, because you may, now I know this is blasphemous. This is a Macintosh user group. You're all Apple people, but you may have an Android person in your home, or people in your home may end up getting Android devices and may want to be able to control things from there. So don't just look for stuff that's only going to work with Apple Home. Matter devices are going to work with any of the ecosystems, or look for the badge that also says that it works with, I'm not going to say her name, but Amazon's Assistant, or works with Google Home. My next tip is don't forget about other people that need to be able to operate your home. This is why I like switches. People know how to use switches. If the only way to turn on or off the lights is to have an app, that is not good for your babysitter. And it sure as hell is not going to endear you to your in-laws. So keep in mind that other people, including others in your household, who might not think all this cool geeky stuff is all that cool, might just want to hit a switch. So don't forgo having basic control and uh, only have stuff available through an app. A switch is still a valuable part of your home. And something else to consider when you're looking at smart switches is a lot of smart switch manufacturers love trying to reinvent the idea of a switch. They think, oh, we have this canvas. We could do all these things in this space of a Tacora paddle. I could put all these buttons. I could have different shapes. I could, if you look at the thing, or your spouse, or your kids, or your friend looks at it and doesn't know how to use it, or doesn't know how to turn the light on, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. There's a lot of switches out there where, and if you're a math geek, you'll get this. The fulcrum point of the switch is at the top instead of in the center, like it is with a normal paddle. You can flip something around a center point to turn it on or turn it off. A lot of smart switches, that pivot point is at the top, which means that you have to press the bottom of the switch to turn it on. Who thinks that way? Nobody does. So I have a bunch of friends, because I rant about this, that call these Gunther switches. These are the kind of switches that Richard Gunther rants about. I generally recommend avoiding them so you don't annoy the rest of your family. When you're setting up a smart home, you have to name everything that you put in your home. So think about those names logically. If you create a scene that's called Linda's fabulous chill down scene, there's a really good chance that Linda's partner isn't going to know what that means. He's going to be like, well, I don't know how to make this thing start. I don't know what this is. Call things by something that makes sense so that everybody in your home will know what it is. And try to name things uniquely. You're probably going to have a lot of things that you might call table lamp. So call it the living room table lamp, even though it's in the living room. And Apple Home's smart enough to just truncate where it says living room when it shows you that. Because if you put it in a room called living room, then it's not going to redundantly tell you that it's the living room table lamp. It's just going to call it table lamp, but it knows that it's the living room table lamp. And that's important because, unfortunately, Siri is still pretty dumb. And when you ask Siri to do stuff, and the 60% of the time that Siri gets it right, you want Siri to know exactly what you're talking about. My Siri just woke up. So you need to be very careful about naming things so that it is going to control the right stuff when you're talking about things. It's not smart enough yet to know that you're in the living room. So when you tell it to turn on the table lamp, you want the lamp in that room. It's not smart enough yet. Hopefully it will be soon. There's a concept in Apple Home called zones, and this is really powerful. When I ask my assistant to play music for me, I tell it to play music downstairs. And I've grouped a bunch of rooms under the zone called downstairs. And that lets me automatically play anything to the speakers that are in that room. Or I could tell it to turn on all the downstairs lights. And it's just going to go ahead and turn everything on downstairs because I'm cleaning, let's say. So that's a good use case for that. So zones are really, really useful for allowing you to do things across multiple areas in your home. Next piece of advice is don't buy the cheapest thing you can find on Amazon, because there's a reason it's cheap. It probably isn't going to last. It's probably not going to be as reliable or compatible. The brands that you see all the time that are more expensive are more expensive for a reason. It's usually because they're true and tried and they last. When we get to recommendations in just a minute, I'm going to recommend a couple brands that have been out there for a long time, and just avoid the temptation to say, well, but this light is $30 and this other manufacturer is making a color changing light for $7. So I'll buy the $7 one. If that $7 one is still working in 2 to 3 years, I'm going to be shocked, quite frankly. It's just, these are becoming commodities and it's a race to the bottom to build cheap products. And unfortunately, you get what you pay for. I talked about hubs a little bit ago. A lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want another hub in my home. It's just another thing. Hubs aren't necessarily bad. Hubs are good because why? They get stuff off your Wi-Fi. So if you have a bunch of Hue bulbs, every one of those bulbs doesn't show up on your Wi-Fi. Just the bridge, just the thing that connects to the network. All the bulbs talk to each other through Zigbee. And your Wi-Fi network is oblivious to that. And that's a good thing. It keeps that traffic off of your network. So just resist the temptation to push back on a hub. Sometimes there are hubs for reasons. I generally recommend that people prefer dimmers over switches. And by prefer, I mean consider purchasing a dimmer instead of a switch in most cases. Fans obviously need a switch. Anything with a motor needs a switch. But there's something so nice about walking into a room and the motion sensor picking you up and having the lights just ramp on subtly as you walk in, or having it know that you're there at night. And so I only want the light to come on 40% so that it doesn't blind me in the late night. That flexibility that a dimmer gives you is, in my opinion, worth the extra money in many cases. All right, now I'm going to share some recommendations for products if anyone's interested. My first for lighting is Lutron Caseta switches. It's pronounced Caseta. I hear people say Caseta all the time. They're wrong. The Lutron has been in the lighting business forever. Their Caseta product line is built off of a legacy of technology that they've been developing for a very long time. It is very reliable. It is not inexpensive. a typical smart switch would be about $60. A dimmer might be about $60 to $70. But they also have these great remotes that I talked about called Pico remotes. And their Pico remotes are these things that look just like a wall switch and can be mounted, in fact, even inside a switch plate to look like and work exactly like a wall switch. And you pair one of those with a smart switch and boom, 3-way circuit right there, even though you don't have any more wiring that you're doing in your home. Brilliant solution. My second lighting recommendation is that if you're into the bulb side of things and you want smart color lighting or maybe smart white tunable lighting that can adapt to your circadian rhythm, then I recommend Hue bulbs. There are many others out there, many, many, many. I have Hue bulbs that I've been using for 11 years. They still work. Now, newer ones are brighter, newer ones have more features, but the old ones still work just fine. And so it's kind of proof to what you pay for is going to be more reliable if you're paying more for it. I have some cheaper bulbs from Sylvania, some cheaper bulbs from other manufacturers that just have not lived up, and I've had to get rid of them. So I'm not just like sharing stories. This is lived experiences. Hopefully you can benefit from it. And then on the sensor side, I mentioned sensors are a great thing. Hue by far makes the fastest motion sensor I have ever used. That thing will detect me and send a signal to HomeKit and turn on the light immediately. And I've tested this against probably half a dozen other sensors. And I cannot find one that works as quickly as the Hue motion sensor. Very, very good sensor. It also detects light. It also detects temperature. So you can kind of have a monitor of temperature around your home, which is nice. Now, if you don't already have Hue stuff, like Philips Hue bulbs, like we just talked about, then this might not make sense because it does require the Hue bridge. And that's one of the things that you use when you have Hue bulbs. So as a backup for that, just that new Akara sensor that I just mentioned, the Akara presence sensor, is really powerful and really useful. That's another one that I would recommend. I suggested the Lutron Pico just a bit ago, so we'll skip that. I am a big fan of keypads. Just like physical switches, keypads let you take scenes and make them accessible with a push button instead of having to know the magic words that you have to say to your assistant, or instead of having to go into the app. So your people in your home or your babysitter or your in-laws might be able to find the button that says all on or movie time or cleaning or all off, because you can just assign buttons to them and label them. This is a great way to associate the smart things that you built in your home with a physical familiar device in a place that people would expect to find it, right in the wall, right where your switch is. Now, if you are looking to stay on the more economical side, IKEA's Home Smart system, yes, they reverse the words for some reason. Their Home Smart system, again, I'm going to massacre this, Dirja, I think. Their hub is very powerful. They have a whole ecosystem of their own thread-free devices, bulbs, and sensors and plugs that are relatively inexpensive and very reliable. They just came out with they just dropped like a whole tranche of new devices, like over a dozen new devices. They're all thread based and they work over Matter. And anything that you connect to this hub from them is automatically going to show up in HomeKit. Again, really big benefit of using these hubs. So I will wrap up by answering the question that I started with about an hour ago. I went the whole time actually. And that is, where do you start? And my answer to that is really to start by trying to solve a problem. You have a door that people constantly forget to close, or you're worried about a leak under the sink, or you're worried about your daughter wandering around the house at night and you're not going to know that she's up. There's probably a dozen things you could think of that are problems around your home that you want to try and solve. And smart home technology, specifically implemented through an Apple Home, is a fairly easy and not inexpensive, but not overly expensive way to solve these problems with technology. That's going to wrap it for me. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them for you.
I've
got
Go
a
for it.
question.
Whoops.
I've got a question. I've got a couple of things here in the chat in terms of starter home security systems and maybe TVs. What are your thoughts on those?
TVs are tricky. Is sometimes people want TVs to be smart because they're connected, but they don't want them to be smart because they don't want all the advertising and they don't want the built-in interface because they're usually terrible. And if you have an Apple TV, then you probably don't care so much about that. My answer to most people is don't worry about the TV. Get the TV that's going to give you the best picture and work in the space that you have. And instead, get an Apple TV. And the Apple TV is going to then tie it in and tie you into all the Apple Home stuff that you have around your home, including being able to cast to that television or being able to see who's at the front door and stuff like that. So it's less about the TV and more about leveraging the devices that you can attach to it.
And security systems?
That's a tricky one. You could argue that you could build your own security system with some of this stuff. I don't know that that's necessarily going to pass your insurance company's test. So as far as security systems that work with Apple Home, I don't have any personal experience. Most of the systems I'm aware of that are getting good grades, like the DIY systems, like SimpliSafe and like Ring. The Ring Protect system is actually a really good system, not at all compatible with Apple's ecosystem. And I know that I personally have been asking Jamie Siminoff, and many people have been asking Amazon, when are you going to make this stuff work with HomeKit? And the answer's always been, we're not going to do it until we get it right. And I think what that really means is that the standards aren't in place yet that would allow them to do it in a maximally compatible way. And I think we're getting there with Matter. There's right now, one of the big missing things from Matter is cameras. Cameras are pivotal to security systems. And the Matter standard has just been released for cameras for manufacturers to start developing toward. I'm hoping, and I fully intend to see Jamie when I see him at CES, Jamie Siminoff, the founder of Ring, if in fact that will be what they need, if they're willing to talk about now potentially making their system compatible with Apple HomeKit, because I think that would be a big deal. So my answer is as far as Apple Home is concerned, I don't think any of the big guys in the DIY space that are kind of sanctioned by insurance companies and getting good grades from places like Consumer Reports and such, I don't think any of them actually work with HomeKit yet.
You mentioned not using or not tying up your router and some of the other devices in your home. You're not using Wi-Fi, or you are using Wi-Fi? You have Thread and what you just said, the other different protocols. How do they communicate if they're not using Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so Thread and Wi-Fi, while they both can operate in the same band, if you know what I mean, they're using the same kind of frequency of the wireless airspace. The Thread network does not actually run over Wi-Fi. Thread devices communicate to each other through their own radio. It's actually, interestingly enough, the same radio that supports Zigbee, one of the older protocols. And so that keeps the traffic of turn on this bulb. And is that bulb on yet? Do I hear it yet? Is it on yet? What color is it? All of that stuff doesn't have to go over your Wi-Fi. The only thing, that ends up going over your Wi-Fi is usually the final result that ends up getting reported out to home so that it can appear on your phone. So all the negotiation and handshake and everything saying, did it happen yet? Yes, it happened. Or no, it didn't happen. I have to send the signal again. All of that, none of that has to go over your Wi-Fi. Just the final result saying that, yep, it's finished. It worked.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple questions.
I'm glad you just jumped in because I saw you trying to talk, but everybody else was talking before you actually spoke, Linda.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Does anybody make, and do you have any recommendations for vertical blinds, like for a sliding glass door? I've not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there are a couple companies right now, most of them startups or smaller smart home companies, that have come out with devices to drag shades along a rod or along a track. And that's the kind of system that a vertical blind system typically uses. I
Oh.
think SwitchBot is one of them. If you can imagine adding something to a track that has batteries in it and a motor and enough torque to be able to actually move and push stuff that's also on that track, is going to get a little bit ungainly and not necessarily be all that attractive. So
Okay.
of the solutions that I've seen that work on that sort of thing, on that sort of system, they're not something that I think most people would want to have in their homes. One of the best systems that I've seen works well in, and I wish I knew the name of it, and I can follow up with you, Linda, if you're really interested, for the kind of blinds or the kind of shades now where they kind of zigzag on over a rail. So like the one pleat is in front of the rail, the next pleat is behind the rail, the next pleat is in front of it, and so and it hides behind one of the pleats
Right.
at one end and then pushes everything over from that position. So in that case, that works pretty well. I don't know that would work as well on verticals, but that it's something that I can certainly follow up on because I know there's been I've had discussions about this in the past. I know there are people interested in this.
Yeah, I would be interested. No rush on it though, because
Okay,
yeah, no rush at all. And then
sure.
for doorbells, um, for privacy, I'm not interested necessarily in Amazon knowing who comes in and out of my house and et cetera.
Fair enough.
But I would like a doorbell that I could hear better in my house. We're in a townhouse and kind of tall and narrow. Any recommendations for something like that?
Yeah, so there are a number of companies that make doorbells that are compatible with Apple Home.
Yeah.
Arlo, Ecobee, yes,
Okay.
that Ecobee that makes thermostats. Akara, the company that makes the sensor and the keypad I talked about. Eufy.
Okay.
These manufacturers all make doorbells that will work with the Apple Home ecosystem. Now,
Oh,
the thing with the doorbell is that if you want online access to the camera, many of them may charge you a subscription fee for that.
okay.
So that's something to think about as you're comparing different products. I don't know these days who has a subscription and who doesn't. You mentioned that you don't want Ring or you don't want Amazon necessarily having your video. Well, that's fine because, like I said, Ring doesn't even play in the Apple HomeKit space yet.
Right.
But and they do charge a fee if you want to have most of the camera capabilities with their devices. But what all of these devices get you is the ability to react to the doorbell being pressed, to use that doorbell press as a trigger. So then with Apple Home, you could have it do anything. You could have it play something over your smart speaker.
Okay.
In fact, I have through Homebridge. Remember, I said you can use things like Homebridge and Home Assistant to tie non-compatible systems into Apple Home. I do have my Ring doorbell hooked in to my Apple Home. And when the doorbell rings, it rings on every single one of my HomePods throughout the house,
Okay. Yeah.
which is really, really nice because then I can hear it everywhere. I'm in the same position. If I'm down in the basement, I can hear the doorbell.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a nice feature. But you could also have it maybe turn a light on if you have someone with a hearing issue in your home. You could also have it say flash a light or turn a light on to let someone know that there's someone at the door too.
Okay. Okay. Ecobee, Arlo, and what was the other one that you mentioned?
I would also look into Akara, Aqara.
AQARA. Okay. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you. That's the two things I was after.
All right. Anyone else?
Other people. we might be about
right.
ready to let you get some sleep.
All right, that would be great. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the time to talk with you. If you ever want to dive deeper into a particular area, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to come back sometime. I tried to just provide a bunch of information up front to kind of give you some exposure to what's possible and some of my suggestions on how to go about that. But I know it's a lot, and I think the video will be available to rewatch. And I can also share a PDF of the deck I shared if that's helpful to you.
That would be great.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, please do. Please, you can
All right.
That'd be
shoot that to
great.
me or however you want to do it.
Okay. Perfect. I'm happy to.
Okay. Well,
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.